Nikesh, as you said, first time in India on business.
No. I've been on business in India many times, but
in
Bombay,
years.
In Bombay first time, yes.
5 years.
5 years.
I mean, I know Google isn't a massive player in terms of your overall strategy, but from the people you've spoken with, what sort of sense are you getting in terms of where India is going in terms of infrastructure, which is key to the success of your business, and in terms of coming up with a coherent telecom plan?
Well, what's fascinating is there seems to be a pervasive sense of optimism. So everybody believes that we are poised for continued growth. Everybody believes that investment needs to be made in various parts of infrastructure. Although it does seem to take its time. As a country, India still seems to be taking a little bit more time than many of its competitive peers out there in terms of just being able to go out and build the infrastructure as quickly as possible.
One competitive peer is China, of course, and widely reported that Google is facing an uphill task in China in terms of censorship laws. I'm not sure how accurate the 99.9% chance of you guys exiting the China search business is, but does India become more important in terms of overall contribution to strategy if you do indeed exit China?
Well, I think first the China issue is that we went into the country hoping that our presence there would allow us to help drive more progress in the notion of freedom of expression for the people there. And recent events where we were sort of not comfortable with the notion of filtering recently, which we saw more and more of. So we've announced that we're going to review our operations in China. So we're in the process of talking with the Chinese government. Now, that notwithstanding, I think your question around whether India becomes more important vis-a-vis China, from our perspective, it's not an either-or. It's sort of like both the markets are really important. They are populous. They are growing really rapidly. And they have a bunch of users who are excited about technology and want technology. So from that perspective, they're both important. Clearly, we'd love to spend more time, more attention in India, and we're trying to do it. It's just a challenge, as we alluded to earlier in our conversation, is that we need infrastructure to continue to grow as fast as it can.
I sound that some disappointment in your tone of voice. You need infrastructure, and you're not alone. I mean, Sunil Bharti Mittal says exactly the same thing. You need infrastructure, but no one is ready to commit the attention to infrastructure right now.
Well, it's not that, we need infrastructure, to be fair. I think there is a population in this country which is very technologically savvy. I mean, come on, we are deemed as the people who go out and do most of the outsourcing around the world, so we are building the systems for people outside in the world. I think it's only fair that the people in this country enjoy the labors of all those people. It's like you have technologists everywhere in the world from India. So for that population, for the people out there, it's important that we continue to build infrastructure. As we were discussing earlier, you could never have predicted how many mobile phones this country would have an appetite for when you set out to give mobile services. And clearly, it's outpaced anybody's expectations. So I think the same thing is likely to happen on the internet or broadband or those kinds of things. It's just a matter of somebody needs to set their mind, go out and build it.
You were talking earlier about wanting to offer new services, new applications for an Indian market. What would those be?
I think clearly it's evident, given this is probably one of the few countries in the world where there is such a large disparity between mobility and the broadband sort of efforts around the country. If you look, there's roughly close to 500 million people using mobile phones, and there's 70 million people on the internet. So clearly, it's a factor of 5 or 10 that we're talking about. In that context, I think clearly the focus will be more mobile-centric than it has been in most parts of the world in terms of our ability to offer services to people.
One thing could be streaming IPL on YouTube. What do you expect out of that venture? What do you want out of that?
I think what's fascinating is that if you think about content, so if you look at consumer behavior, right? Consumers have flocked to the internet originally for communication. So, the early parts of the internet was people sending emails back and forth to each other or, talking on instant messengers, etc. And over time, that leads to e-commerce and it leads to entertainment. So entertainment, community, communication seem to be the centerpiece of the internet for the masses. And then there is some amount of commerce that is associated with that. So India clearly is high on the communication front. It's very high on people using mobile phones. And we believe entertainment is clearly one of those areas where people are very excited about. So from that perspective, it's fascinating to be able to offer IPO and YouTube as a streaming service. I think not just in India, it also has fantastic ability for us to export that content outside of India to users around the world.
Can you make money out of that? How do you make money out of that?
I think, one of the things which Google has always done is we have tried to create a moment of wow for the consumer. And once you create enough moments of wow for the consumer and you get a lot of people excited about a service, over time a business model emerges, right? It's a lot more money when you can get $1 out of 100 million people as opposed to getting $100 out of 100,000 people. So our initial aim is to get tremendous amounts of usage, get a lot of people excited about it, create that behavior where people believe, wow, this is my preferred way of doing something. Once you do that, you can create economic models around it. But without having a lot of users, it's very, very hard to make any money.
Do you play cricket in Palo Alto? You're from Delhi, so are you supporting the Delhi team?
I definitely follow cricket. I think, as is true with the many people I was having a conversation on this trip, people are still trying to figure out which team they want to support because their favorite players are spread across different teams, given the way the IPO works. So people are trying to figure out, is my loyalty to where I live, is my loyalty to a specific set of players that I'm excited about, or is my loyalty towards the winner? So I think it's going to take a few sessions for us to figure out which ones are our favorites.
You're talking about consumer behavior a short while ago. I mean, consumer behavior, because of the extraordinary financial difficulties in the United States and most of Western Europe, have changed. So you cannot bank on the US market or the Northern European market as much as you could. So where do you see growth coming from? Where does Google see its future?
Well, from our perspective, the way we see it, there is still 3/4 of the world which doesn't have internet connectivity, right? So only a quarter of the world has it. There is still roughly a third of the world which has mobility, right? So there's 2/3 of the world which doesn't have mobility. So one aspect is we just expect as technology penetrates the masses around the world, as countries, as India continues to build broadband, Africa continues to do so, you will see more and more users come on the net. So clearly there is a natural trend which is sort of in the favor of technology. At the same time, existing consumers are changing their behaviors. Earlier, 5 years ago, people would go to the internet, do certain things. Today, in most Western countries, people will not buy any high-ticket item without doing a lot of research on the internet. So clearly, consumer behavior is shifting towards preferencing digital technology purely for convenience as well as for comprehensiveness of information. So from that perspective, the trend is sort of our friend. In terms of where the growth is likely to come from, to your point, it is going to come from populous countries where technology is on an uptick, whether it's India, whether it's China, whether it's parts of Africa. It is going to come from existing consumers and spending more time using the technology. And I think it is going to come from more businesses realizing that's where the audiences are. So businesses have not been as quick as moving to the internet generally as the consumers have been in many parts of the world. So that trend also continues. So if you add those all up, I think the future is bright.
The key, of course, is that Google, obviously, like any company, needs to stay on top of its game. I read somewhere a year ago you had two big competitors, Microsoft and Yahoo. A year later, which is today, you've got something like 10 competitors, including Facebook, Twitter, Yelp. Extraordinarily popular with the younger set, basically consumers of the future. What do you do? What do you do if you're sitting in Palo Alto? How do you beat those guys? Or how do you save those guys from eating your lunch?
Well, I think it's fair to think about, first of all, the digital economy is going to be a very, very big economy. It already is. It is going to get bigger. You pick the industry, right? If you look at advertising, it's about a $700 billion market. Roughly about $70 billion is now online. As audiences move to the online side, you'll see that $70 billion number start closing on the $700 billion, right? If you look at music, if you look at entertainment, if you look at newspapers, a lot of stuff is moving digitally. So I think it's going to be a very big market, and there will be many players in that market. So from that perspective, I don't think we're going to be the only player in the market who is going to be successful, and I wish all the other people a lot of success. In terms of your comment about competitors, we don't spend time worrying about competition. I think our biggest challenge is our own ability to execute. So what we focus on is let's go out and create amazing products which consumers are going to love. If you can create products that consumers are going to love, that's fine. That's what is most important. If you worry about what the other guy is doing, you end up defocusing, you end up trying to replicate them, or you end up trying to compete with them. So, the fascinating thing is our product managers, our engineers, they spend their time figuring out what's the next thing that you want, what's the next thing that I want, and if they can create that wow experience, then it doesn't really matter.
So what's the next thing do you guys have, which I'm going to say, wow?
There's lots of exciting stuff going on, right? I mean, Gmail came out of nowhere, and two guys sat down and said, I don't like the way all the email systems work in the world. And there were 300 email systems. Those guys said, I'm going to do it differently. And why do people have to delete their emails? Let's give them a gigabyte of storage, so they don't have to delete it. That was the first. That was the basic premise on which Gmail was born. We were on a plane with the founders one day, and they said, "You know what? The world's maps are very static. Why don't they get updated quickly?" And then we were flying on a plane and said, "No, what if we flew a plane crisscross over the entire country? It would take 6 months, and we'd get much better data and much better pictures. And let's provide people both a visual perspective and a cartographic perspective." And suddenly, Google Maps is now probably the most popular mapping software we see in most countries in the world. So, we sit down and think of large technological problems of scale and say, how do we solve it? I'm personally very excited about all the work that's going on mobile phones and Android. I'm very excited about our stuff that is going on in browsing, the Chrome browser, the Chrome operating system. So it's very fascinating.
Mobile phones is interesting because you have invaded a space where the iPhone is very dominant. And at one point in time, there was a great partnership, or potential of a great partnership, between Apple and Google. And now, with your Android mobile phone, Apple is upset that it's not kosher. So
I think if you think about the future, and if you believe that the world is getting more and more technologically aligned, you are going to see many players in the technology space both compete and collaborate. So there will be places where we will have competing products, and there will be places we'll work together. So Apple still uses a lot of Google search. We still use our iPhones. We love. We still use a bunch of Macs. So I think there is going to be lots of areas of competition and collaboration. They have a different model around mobile phones. We have a different one. And our view is we should provide an open source operating system that allows more people to develop lots and lots of cool things, as opposed to just us having to do them. And that's why there are 20 different Android devices out there, which are being built by different people and sold by different people. Theirs is a different model. So at the end of the day, consumer will decide.
I want to talk a little bit about Buzz.
Yes.
And this, I don't understand Buzz. I love Gmail, and I chat all the time, but Buzz foxes me. And then there are privacy issues when it comes to Buzz. What happened?
Buzz is a social networking platform which is around the notion of sharing, clearly. Facebook is a social networking platform. Buzz is a social networking platform. There are many others out there. It's around the notion of sharing. And our view is that something like Buzz allows people to dynamically come together on a certain topic and then sort of congregate and leave and come back on a different topic. So it's sort of a more dynamic model from a social networking perspective. And it's in its very, very early version. It's just been launched.
It's going to change.
It's going to constantly evolve. Things in the technology. Our philosophy is launch early, launch often. So we keep changing things as we get more and more consumer feedback. I think the challenge we ran into with Buzz was we just sort of, in our launch early, launch often philosophy, we ended up not checking on one or two things. And we very quickly fixed it. We fixed it in 24 hours. So, the issue, there was nothing going on from a privacy perspective. It was just that some of the choices were not evident as clearly to consumers as we would have liked them to, and we fixed that in 24 hours.
There's a very important FCC announcement coming up, I guess, in the next 24 hours. What do you expect from that, and how will it change business opportunities for Google?
Look, bandwidth is a good thing. So the FCC is going to announce their national broadband plan very shortly, and we've already announced that we're going to work with 2 cities in the United States to provide 1 gigabit access to the users, which is 250 times the national average of the U.S.
And no names of the cities.
We haven't decided the names. We haven't decided. I think what's fascinating to watch, actually, cities are competing with each other to get our attention, which is great. Our view towards doing that is if we can prove it in 1 or 2 markets at a reasonable, cost-effective sort of ratio, there's a probability that will spur other people to do it or spur the existing players to do it, which is going to be fantastic, right? Because at the end of the day, sort of technology is fascinating. If you look at the development of computing power, if you look at the development of storage, it's just doubled every year. So, what you can buy today on an Android phone, you needed $30 million of service 25 years ago to produce that same computing capacity. So you can buy it for $500. So over 25 years, what would take us $30 million in 6 months to integrate has been done on a chip, which we can buy today for $500. So just look at the pace of innovation. So I'm pretty sure if we can provide broadband access to people, we'll find phenomenal applications in the future, which we just haven't thought of. I think that's why it just makes sense for that to happen. And as a part of this, we hope we'll become the catalyst to get other people to try and do the same thing.
And that experience coming to me in Bombay.
I think we go back to the beginning of our conversation. We need help on infrastructure.
That will come, right?
I'm pretty sure. Look, just talking to the people in the last 2 or 3 days I've been here, there is tremendous optimism, there's tremendous hope, there's tremendous sort of commitment from various players that they want to be in that space, and with many different. I think the good news is in India you're seeing competition, and competition is always a good thing, because when you have competition, people will compete for the attention of the consumers with better, faster services.
Early this month at a tech expo in Santa Clara, California, Steve Ballmer was asked if Microsoft will ever be the #1 search engine, and he said, yeah, especially with Bing becoming Yahoo's search engine. Does that keep you up at night? I mean,
yeah, I think you can never underestimate wonderful companies like Microsoft. They have been the mainstay of technology for many, many, many years. I think many of us grew up using many of their products. So I think, clearly they're trying to focus and put their attention on trying to compete in the search space. But from our perspective, again, as I said, we're focused on the consumer. If we believe, a lot of people use Google, hopefully around the world, in India as well, and we believe if we continue to focus on getting them great services, we will give them less and less of a reason to leave us and go search elsewhere. But having said that, we're one click away from competition.
Facebook, another extraordinarily popular, not just in India.
It's very popular globally. I use it.
I use it all the time.
Fantastic.
I know it's kind of a silly question. Would you ever buy Facebook? Would you ever acquire Facebook? But, I mean, is that conceivable?
I don't think anybody would let us, even if we wanted to. And I think, as I said to you earlier, there are going to be many players who are going to win in the internet space. And it's not fair to expect that there's going to be one company in the end. So one shouldn't expect Facebook to acquire Apple or Google to acquire Facebook. I think there'll be many players who will be very good at what they do, and they'll find reasons to collaborate, because we think we're really good at providing search. We think we're really good at providing digital advertising solutions. So we're going to be good at our stuff.
Google will never, ever become the New York Times / a technology company / Reuters. At one point in time, there was a discussion that Google would own the world's media.
I don't think that's true. I think Google helps navigate a certain part of the media landscape. And to be fair, today there are advertising agencies, there are media players. We have one form of media, and we help sell other forms of media. So we help sell a lot of display. We help sell other people's search engines. So I think if you understand the DNA of the company, what turns us on is solving problems of technological scale. So if you look at everything that we're doing, it can be explained like that, right? We're trying to solve the mobile phone OS ecosystem, which is a huge ecosystem, and we believe by doing it open source and providing a platform, it takes away 20% of the cost of building mobile phones, and it probably takes away 6 months of delay in people trying to adapt various operating systems. If you look at the operating, let me step back. The best way from our perspective to think about technology for us is on 3 ends. One is it's on the device end, the devices you and I carry. The second part of it is in the connectivity between that device and through the network, right? And the third is, what do you do on the device? What can I do? So if you think about it in those very simple places, we're trying to help on the device and the mobile side by the operating system, or we're trying to help make the device better and faster with our efforts around Chrome. If you look at the latency, we're trying to help stimulate some of the latency conversations with the FCC plan, the 1 gigabit plan we just talked about. And if you look at what I can do on top, you'll see us working with various people in the application space. We just announced an application marketplace for enterprise customers. We have an application marketplace for Android phones. So that's how we think about technology and see how we can solve problems of great scale, which actually will end up creating sort of a faster pace of innovation revolution.
And obviously all this needs money to spend. Yes. As we move into the summer of 2010, U.S. recovery, it's there. It's without employment. How do you see global markets? How do you see your business in this environment?
As we announced in our last quarterly results, we are seeing the large companies come back and spend money on the internet in the U.S. It was a very good quarter from that perspective. Retail was very strong. What's actually interesting in addition to people spending money, what has happened in the U.S. is earlier there were a lot of pure play internet companies like the Amazons, the eBays, etc. And what's happened in the last 3 to 4 years is that many of the bricks and mortar companies, like the Targets, the Sears, the JCPenney's, the Walmarts, they've decided that this is not a bastion they want to let go. They also need to be as good in the online space as they are in the real world. So they've actually beefed up their capabilities, and they've actually decided they want to be players in the online space. So you're beginning to see growth not just from pure play internet companies, but also people who've developed their capabilities on the internet, because such a large proportion of the population is spending time on the web. So that's a fascinating trend, and that trend replicates itself in many advanced technology markets where people, penetration is between 60 to 80% for broadband on the internet. So you're seeing that big surge come back. In addition to that, from an economic perspective, Western Europe is, for the most part, back or stable. There are some countries in the southern Europe
very
part.
patchy.
It's patchy, yes. And again, Europe is not one country. This is 60 different countries. So clearly every country has its own economic sort of stimulus and economic conditions going on. But generally speaking, we're not where we were 6 months ago. Generally speaking, there seems to be reasonable confidence in many, many parts of the world. And look at Asia. Asia's come back.
Do you think India, there is some belief that India could overtake China in the next 2 to 3 years? If it does, then it makes it all the more exciting for Google.
Look, I think India is an exciting market for Google, however you look at it. As I mentioned, this is a technologically savvy market. People get technology, not just the narrow niche of technologies, but generally broad-based middle class gets technology. So from that perspective, it's a very exciting market. It's an exciting market it's a democratic country. People understand things. People have access to lots of information. Information is good for every part of the process, whether it's a political process, or whether it's the economic process. So, it is a market which is very exciting, and we continue to hope to be able to play an important part in it.
You also sit on the board of Bharti Airtel, and you know Sunil Bharti Mittal well. He obviously is trying very hard to expand, like everyone should, Africa being one of them through Zen. Is that the best way to go about it?
I think Africa in the long term is going to be, again, if you step back and go back 50 years and look where economic development has taken many different countries around the world, it becomes a no-brainer that everybody should participate in any developing economy in the world if you have a long-term perspective. So from that perspective, clearly Africa is a market which is going to do wonderfully in the long term. And not only that, there's a fantastic notion of being able to provide services to a developing economy, whether it's India, whether it's parts of Africa, whether it's parts of Eastern Europe. It's a wonderful thing to do.
And I know you're on the board, you're not running Bharti Mittal, but is it likely to happen, the Zen deal?
I would leave Sunil to answer that question. I think it would be unfair to speculate.
Should we see you back in India more, on business?
Look, I'm committed to coming back to this country. I grew up here. I was born here. Mm-hmm. I have a special place for India in my heart. I would like to see the country do wonderfully, which it already is. And any part that me or Google can contribute, we would gladly do so.
But you mentioned earlier India is a tiny part of Google's global pie. I mean, again, what will it make? What has to happen for it to be a bigger part of that pie?
And I think, look, as you mentioned, the GDP is growing fantastically. The advertising markets continue to grow. Our primary source of revenue is advertising. So clearly, we end up getting some proportion of the advertising market in whichever country we participate. At the same time, our biggest excitement and enthusiasm comes from the products that the consumers pick up. And, we have had reasonable success with many of our products that we've launched in the Indian market. Clearly, the market seems to like our products. So, what has to happen is it's going to be the growth of the internet. It's going to be the affinity of businesses to the internet. And to some degree, I think it will also be Indian businesses wanting to participate in the global economy from a content perspective.
How does that happen?
Well, as you can see, there's 1 billion people in India or more, but there's a lot of people outside of India. And the internet is not just a platform for a local market. It's also a platform for people outside the country. Bollywood makes more movies, we're sitting in Bombay, makes more movies than Hollywood. Most of the Western world is now beginning to consume entertainment on the web. Maybe there's an opportunity for content from India to make it all over the world because there is a very simple and easy distribution platform available.
Google in distributing not just IPL cricket but Bollywood.
Well, IPL cricket is a form of exporting Indian content to a global audience. Mm-hmm. And granted, there's cricket aficionados in at least 12 countries, which are part of the Commonwealth, but there's more.
Is that a viable business plan?
Why not? If you think about the cost of distribution is minimal, right? Mm-hmm. Everybody has their computers. They have their broadband access to their computers in the Western world. There are servers sitting out there serving content. So all you got to do is make sure the content gets to the server. That's not that hard. So it's an interesting option, isn't it?
Sachin Tendulkar and Bipasha Basu in Palo Alto soon.
Coming soon to a computer near you.
Nikesh, wonderful to speak to you. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure. Thank you.